Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel, man. Today we have actually a Detroit Pistons mock draft video for you guys. In this mock draft that I found, the first player selected was to the Orlando Magic, and it was for Jabari Smith. So in this mock draft, the Detroit Pistons draft Chet Holmgren, and I want to talk about it a little bit because the Pistons roster, the Pistons organization in general, really intrigues me. They have a really intriguing roster. You know, obviously Isaiah Stewart, Killian Hayes, Cade Cunningham, Saddiq Bey, a bunch of young talent. Chet Holmgren would be really, really interesting. So basically, if they had the second pick in the draft and you had Jabari Smith go number 1 to Orlando, you would be picking pretty much between Chet, Banchero, and Jaden Ivey. I forget where it was, but I think it was just a funny thing, like somewhere on something, Jaden Ivey, like it was like something about me, I think is what it was, and he put like excited to play with Cade Cunningham next year or something, which was, I thought that was like absolutely hilarious. He's a shooting guard out of Purdue, and he can really hoop. So the thing is with Detroit, and welcome back to the channel, man. If you guys enjoy it, hit the like button, hit that sub button. I try and post as many Pistons videos as I possibly can. Pistons Nation, I love hearing from you guys down below because I want to see where you guys think you should take the team, which direction you think the team should go in, basically. So Chet's a really interesting prospect, and we'll talk about his impact on Detroit in just a second, but let's get some stats out of the way. This guy's shooting 44% from downtown, 3.5 blocks per game, and he's playing in 26.8 minutes. That's it. 26.8 minutes per game, and he's 3.5 blocks, dude. It's like Miles Turner numbers. Shooting 73% inside the arc. He's got good passing IQ. Can kind of initiate fast breaks, which is crazy because he's 7 feet tall. And then he had 2 games in February with at least 20 points, 15 boards, and 5 blocks. So 2 games where he went 20, 15, and 5 blocks. The reason I'm mentioning all those statistics is because, first off, I don't think stats really tell the whole story in college. Like, you had like guys like Devin Booker didn't even play. Devin Booker didn't even start a single game, if I'm not mistaken, in his collegiate career at Kentucky. Didn't start a single game. So, you know, I try to not look too much analytically, but the point I'm trying to bring up here is Detroit has this really interesting melting pot of different players. Cade Cunningham, Killian Hayes is coming off of the bench. You still have Killian Hayes. There's still hope, promise, and potential with the guy who's played barely like 80 or so games, if I'm not mistaken. Isaiah Stewart, who is just another one of those just like really interesting, really intriguing players. Saddiq Bey, I mean, that guy is really coming into his own, especially this season. So the reason I mention that is I don't think Detroit would be drafting based off of positions. Like I don't think that they're quite at that point where you're drafting off of positions. I could be wrong, but the way I would see it, if you were to draft Chet Holmgren, is you would have Cade Cunningham at the 1, you'd have Saddiq Bey at the 2, you'd have Jeremy Grant at the 3, and then some type of 4 and 5 with Isaiah Stewart and Chet Holmgren. But if you're the Detroit Pistons and you have the opportunity to draft Chet, even if you're sold on Isaiah Stewart being like your big of the future, you gotta take the risk on Chet. I mean, this is one of those where they talk about it, generational basketball talents. 7 feet tall. He's really interesting, and I think he'd pair well with Isaiah Stewart because he does a lot of his damage from outside of the paint. So you'd be able to have Isaiah Stewart in there. You wouldn't, be worried about spacing if Chet's kind of hanging around outside of the paint and hanging around the perimeter because he's so deadly from out there. I mean, 44% from downtown. That's crazy. I'm viewing him as a similar situation as Evan Mobley. Like, you look at Evan Mobley and you're like, all right, well, this dude's 7 feet tall. He can guard 1 through 5, maybe not like easily, but he can guard 1 through 5 at this point in his early career. 5 years from now, it probably will be a lot easier guarding 5 different positions if you have to. But Evan Mobley, outside of, like, he's so much different than your prototypical, stereotypical big man in the NBA, where it's like, if he's guarding somebody on the outside, you're not worried. If he's guarding somebody in the paint, you're not worried. On offense, if he's in the paint, you're like, all right, cool, let's be aggressive, score some points in the paint. If he's outside on the perimeter, like, cash that 3. He's got a good mid-range. So that's like a phenomenal big man to have. That's an extremely versatile player, a guy who can play forward, a guy who can play center, a guy who can guard multiple positions. He can handle, he can shoot, he can defend, he can do a bunch of different things. So if Detroit were to actually get Chet Holmgren in the draft at number 2, they would be looking really scary. I think their future would be looking really scary, because you'd have, obviously, Cade Cunningham, who I think is a generational point guard, and I feel like I'm throwing the word around generational, but that's how good Cade Cunningham is. And Chet Holmgren, you have kind of like a promising generational type promise, if that makes sense. Like, there is a lot of potential there. So you'd have a roster consisting of a phenomenal starting 5, and then, you know, the bench, you know, you do have Kelly Olynyk, Diallo, Killian Hayes, if you still, you know, if they're still going to go in Killian Hayes' direction. But basically, you'd have Cade Cunningham, Saddiq Bey, Jeremy Grant, Chet, and Isaiah Stewart as kind of like your big 5, like your top 5 on your team. And from there, you just develop, you progress them, and you put the right pieces around them. You know, you find your 2 guys. I think those 2 guys, the guy right now in Detroit's obviously Cade Cunningham. But if you get Chet, you kind of build your entire roster around those 2 players. You build your future around those 2 players. So, man, if Detroit were to get Chet, they'll be scary. They'll be very, very scary, because Cade Cunningham is a phenomenal basketball player. He did start off the season shooting a little bit like dicey, coming off, you know, he was literally injured to start the season, so that's what I'm blaming. But he's putting up crazy, crazy games for a rookie. There's not much, no disrespect to the Detroit Pistons, but it's not like he's surrounded by all that much talent. It's not like he's surrounded by all that much talent. Jeremy Grant is back. Kelly Olynyk is back, but those guys were out for a nice chunk of time, Kelly Olynyk specifically. Killian Hayes is kind of underperforming. Isaiah Stewart, before the All-Star break, was extremely inconsistent. All season was extremely inconsistent. Saddiq Bey is definitely finding his way. And they're just already a pretty young, fun, promising basketball team. I think, you know, most people would agree Troy Weaver's doing a great job, and the Detroit Pistons in the next couple of years will probably be very scary. That's it for today, Pistons Nation. Drop a comment down below. Would you want to see Chet Holmgren if you had the number 2 pick in the draft and Jabari Smith goes number 1? Would you draft Chet? Who would you decide to go with, and why? Drop it down below. As always, hit the like button, hit that sub button. I'll see you guys later.